Ole Miss and Alabama make big statements. Let's take a look back at this weekend's action in the SEC.
You are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
Yes, sir. Welcome back, SEC college football fans. I'm your host, Dustin Smith, coming at you with another episode of the Just a Sec Pod right here on the War Report Network. Look, Ole Miss gets the big win over Georgia. LSU, Alabama, that big rivalry that we've become so accustomed to seeing close games in. Not even close. Alabama, Kalen DeBoer make a big statement. South Carolina gets a big win in Nashville. Let's talk about what we saw this weekend in the SEC, and let's start off with the big one in Oxford, Mississippi. The Ole Miss Rebels, Lane Kiffin finally gets it done. He finally wins the big one, right? Ole Miss 28, Georgia 10. Georgia coming into this game already with the SEC loss at Alabama. Ole Miss coming in with the losses to LSU and Kentucky. Ole Miss had to have it. Jackson Dart said after the game versus LSU, we got to win out. We understand that we got to win out. What a big win for Lane Kiffin and his Ole Miss program, backs against the wall. Let's take a look at the stats real quick. Jackson Dart goes 13 of 22 for 199 yards. He added 8 carries for 50 yards on the ground. He was banged up too. Really just a gutsy performance, kind of in and out the game there in the first half, but still came back in, made the plays when he had to make them. Carson Beck with another turnover-prone performance. We've been seeing this for a month and a half, 2 months, it feels like. Georgia just continues to turn the ball over, and on the road, in the rain, in a game like this, it came back to bite them. Carson Beck goes 20 for 31, 186 yards with an interception. Rushing-wise, Nate Frazier, 12 carries, 47 yards on the ground for Georgia. Travis Etienne never able to establish a ground game either. Trevor Etienne, 6 carries for 24 yards, no touchdowns on the game. Just not a good, they were never able to get going. That Georgia offense was never able to get going on that Ole Miss defense. And that was really the story of the game to me. The Ole Miss defense holding Georgia to 245 total yards, only 59 on the ground. Georgia averaged 3.8 yards a carry. Then you look at what Ole Miss does, and it's a pretty nice little balance, going for 263 through the air, 134 on the ground. Jackson Dart did throw an interception, but 2 fumbles lost by Georgia, one of those by Carson Beck on top of his interception. They had another fumble as well. 3 turnovers to Ole Miss's 1. Well, we come out of the first quarter. Georgia goes down and scores on their opening drive. Into the first quarter, Ole Miss is up 10-7, and from that point on, 6 points in the second for Ole Miss, 6 in the third to Georgia's 3, and they add 6 more to Georgia's 4, or to Georgia's 0 there in the fourth quarter. So for the 28-10 final, it felt like one of those games that Georgia normally wins, where they suffocate an opponent, and you look up and all of a sudden the game's just over and you never really had a shot. That's kind of the way this game played out. Ole Miss gave them a taste of their own medicine, kind of beat them at their own game. And for all the talk about Lane Kiffin can't win the big one, Lane Kiffin had to have this one right here. To Ole Miss wanted any kind of shot at going to Atlanta, competing for the SEC championship, or maybe getting a bye, maybe getting getting into the to the SEC or to the college football playoff with an at-large bid. Looking at Ole Miss's schedule the rest of the way, they go to Florida. They got a bye week, and then they're going to go to Florida and then finish up with Mississippi State there in the Egg Bowl coming to Oxford. So you're sitting at 8-2 if you're Ole Miss. You got a Florida team that we'll talk about briefly at the end of the show. What a terrible weekend for Florida athletics in general, right? But so you're going into Gainesville with a bye week, a game that you should win. And then you got Mississippi State, the worst team in the SEC, coming to finish up in a rivalry game the day after Thanksgiving there in the Egg Bowl. Ole Miss, you just got to finish strong. 8-2, you should get to 10-2 here. And I think that 10-2 with an 18-point victory for Georgia, I don't see how Ole Miss wouldn't make the playoff in that scenario. Now we'll see how this whole SEC championship race falls, because right now it's looking pretty crazy. But Lane Kiffin, man, the winner of the weekend in the SEC, the Ole Miss Rebels, the winner of the weekend, a program-defining win. What a big moment for the program. You're in position now And I'm looking back at that Kentucky loss, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you look at the team that Kentucky has become. But, Ole Miss can't get in a time machine and replay the game. All they could do is go forward, and that's exactly what they've done. A close loss on the road in Baton Rouge at night, a game that Ole Miss probably should have won. They just were not able to get LSU's offense off the field. That's an understandable loss. The Kentucky one is the one that kind of leaves you scratching your head. But if they finish 10-2 here with this victory over Georgia, I think that Ole Miss is sitting right, and they're going to be right there in that playoff conversation. I can't see how a 10-2 Ole Miss team doesn't make it in. So Ole Miss stepped up to the moment. Shout out to the Ole Miss crowd there in Oxford. They showed up in the rain, hazardous conditions. Lane Kiffin didn't have to beg them to show up for this one. They showed up. They showed out. They were loud. I thought the crowd was great. You can see that it gave Ole Miss a boost. But the Ole Miss defense, story of the day, forcing Carson Beck into turnovers. And Carson Beck's got to figure that out. If you're Georgia, you're playing Tennessee next week, an 8-1 Tennessee team. Georgia's sitting here at 7-2. Bulldogs got to figure something out on offense. We know that Tennessee defense is stout. And if you're Georgia, you've got to protect the football, or Georgia's going to fall to 7-3. They're going to fall to 7-3 if they come in there and they start turning the ball over to the Tennessee Volunteers. So that's a big matchup. Georgia's kind of put themselves in a hole now to where they can't lose any games, or their playoff chances will be pretty much eliminated. So it's getting crazy at the top of the SEC. Ole Miss with a big statement. Georgia in unfamiliar territory. Let's see how the Bulldogs respond. Let's see if Ole Miss can handle the hype, because this is going to be uncharted territory for Ole Miss. They're going to be getting gassed up this week. They're going to be getting hyped up this week. Let's see if Ole Miss can handle it. Let's head on down to Baton Rouge, a game that has become known over the last decade or so for being one of the best rivalries in the sport, one of the most competitive games. SEC championship implications always on the line. National championships have been on the line a whole lot. Definitely, this was an elimination game, 2 6-2 teams. You felt like the loser was going to be eliminated from playoff contention, and this one wasn't even close. An absolute bloodbath. Alabama 42 to LSU's 13, and somehow it feels like it was worse than that. The story of the night is Jalen Milroe, who went 12 of 18 on the ground for 109 yards, but he continued to just dice LSU up on the ground. 12 carries, 185 yards. 15.4 yards a carry for 4 touchdowns. LSU has struggled all season. You just saw it versus Marcel Reed at Texas A&M. He dices them up. He comes in the second half, carves LSU's defense up. They're struggling, stopping, scrambling quarterbacks. They were not able to do it. Alabama didn't really have to throw the football through the air. They just got everything they needed on this LSU defense. The other stat of the day here is going to be third downs. Alabama 10 of 13 on third down conversions. LSU 6 of 14. There was a point in the game where it was 21-6 late in the second quarter. LSU's driving. They're on the 5-yard line, about to punch it in, it feels like. Garrett Nussmeier with an inexplicable pick throws it right to the Alabama defender who needs it. Alabama ends up coming out, driving the length of the field, going up 28-6 there, and that was just kind of the nail in the coffin for the LSU team. Really, Garrett Nussmeier, just a disappointing performance from Garrett Nussmeier there. All year, we've seen him be feast or famine, that gunslinger mentality, right? And you felt like you go back to the Ole Miss game, he made all the plays on third down, he made all the throws on fourth down, he did everything he had to do. And there was the feast, but Saturday you got the famine. Fumbling the ball, a bad fumble that led to an Alabama score as well. Two interceptions thrown. LSU loses the turnover margin here 3-0. If you're going to lose a turnover battle 3-0, you're not going to beat Alabama. You're just not going to beat Alabama. For Alabama, for Kalen DeBoer, what a massive victory. They had to have this. The schedule looks pretty favorable for Alabama the rest of the way. The 7-2, they'll be favored in the rest of their games moving forward. We all know that if Alabama gets a 10-2, there's no way that a 10-2 Alabama team doesn't make it to the playoffs. The question will be, can they get into the SEC championship, earn that bye, and all that kind of stuff. But if you're Alabama, this right here kind of felt like the last hurdle. Let's look at Alabama's schedule and who they have remaining. I know they have Mercer this week. They're obviously finished up with a 3-6 Auburn team in the Iron Bowl. There's Oklahoma in the middle of those. So Mercer, Oklahoma, they go to Oklahoma and then finish up at home with Auburn. 3 games remaining for Alabama that they will be favored in. I think Alabama gets to 10-2. I think they make the playoff. This was the one that was in the way. Brian Kelly had not lost a game as LSU's head coach at night in Death Valley, and Alabama comes in and leaves, no doubt. And like I said, I think I misspoke and said it was at the end of the second half or at the end of the first half. It may have been in the second half, but there was a point in the game where LSU's driving. You think they can get back in the game. Garrett Nussmeier throws the interception, and that just kind of put a wrap on it. From that point forward, Alabama put their foot down. They dominated. They never ceased momentum, never gave it away. Jalen Milroe just announcing, like, I'm that guy, And, again, 10 for 13 on third down. If you're LSU, you're sitting here at 6-3. How do you finish? How do you finish if you're LSU? That's the big question. The first 2 years for Brian Kelly, 10-win seasons, coming in and taking over a mess that Ed Orgeron had left him. Last year, you win 10 games, you win the Heisman. There's going to be some questions this offseason about how LSU can take that next step. Can you rein in Garrett Nussmeier? Can you keep that? Can you reach that ceiling, or is this just going to be who he is? You got to take the good with the bad type thing. Can you eliminate some of the bad, rein him in a little bit? A lot of questions for LSU moving forward. They do need to finish the season out strong, though, sign a top 10 recruiting class. So obviously, I think they'll be able to do all that. But tough loss for LSU. Anytime you get thumped 42-13 in a big game when College Game Day was there, you're going to have to look internally and ask some tough questions. LSU's got some things to figure out on that defensive side of the ball. Why are you struggling from the linebacker position at stopping the quarterback from running the ball? Why do you continue to turn the ball over all year on offense? You got outrushed 311. Alabama with 311 yards to LSU's 104 on the ground. Not going to sit well with LSU fans who got dominated at the line of scrimmage for the entirety of 4 quarters. Can't have it. You can't have it if you're LSU. Got some soul searching to do. The Tigers are going to be looking to finish the season strong. We'll see what Brian Kelly can cook up there. And if you're Alabama, at this point, it's just about handling your business versus Oklahoma and Auburn, right? Just not slipping up there and having the couple of those head-scratching performances that Alabama had earlier in the year. So Kalen DeBoer, big win for him. I would argue for Kalen DeBoer, this was a bigger win for Kalen DeBoer than the Georgia game, just because of based off the situation, them already having 2 losses. You had to have that. The kind of questions that would have came if he would have got this team to 6-3. We know them Bama fans would have been asking some tough questions out there in Tuscaloosa. So big win for Kevin DeBoer, big win for the Alabama program. LSU going to have to regroup. Not a good performance. Very, very disappointing from the Bayou Bengals. On to Columbia, Missouri for what was easily the most entertaining game of the day. Missouri takes down Oklahoma 30-23. An incredible comeback. Look, let's go ahead and fast forward to the point in the game where Missouri is trailing 23-16. Backup quarterback Drew Prine, because Brady Cook is hurt, comes in, leads an 8-play, 75-yard touchdown drive that takes just 57 seconds off the clock. The touchdown pass to Theo Weiss Jr. Luther Burden makes a critical catch on the third down, an acrobatic catch at the sideline to keep the drive alive for Missouri. Jackson Arnold and Oklahoma get the ball back. 23-23 ball game. And with 22 seconds to play, Missouri defensive end Zion Young picks up a strip sack fumble, takes it to the end zone. Missouri comes out with a 30-23 game. It was just absolutely wild. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch the way that the last 7 minutes of this game unfolded. What a massive win for Missouri. This is one of the situations where they're just gutting out wins. They had that last-minute win versus Auburn, last-minute win here versus Oklahoma, 2 teams that aren't very good. But we're seeing in this college football season, you just got to survive in advance. And a 20-point fourth quarter from Missouri to get the dub here. Drew Prine was 14 of 27 on the day for 143 yards. Not the most efficient of days, but 3 touchdowns to his 0 interceptions. Protected the football and made the clutch throws on third down when he had to make them. On the flip side, Jackson Arnold, 15 for 24, 74 yards. You're seeing Oklahoma just really struggle to push the ball down the field. The late touchdown they had to tie up the game was off a trick play where Jackson Arnold had a touchdown reception. They're really having to dial things up like that to even move the ball in any kind of capacity. Xavier Robinson for Oklahoma did add 56 yards on the ground, only 9 carries. You kind of ask yourself, why doesn't he get more when he's averaging 6.2 a carry there? Jackson Arnold, 17 carries for 45 yards. Obviously, they've asked him to run a lot. Obviously, there's some sacks that are involved in that. But just this Oklahoma offense just continues to struggle to find its identity. They cannot move the ball down the field. There's no threat of explosive plays. They just feel like they're playing in a shell. It feels like they're playing in a box when you watch them. Missouri has a solid defense, and they were able just to hang in the game, hang around in the game, and capitalize. Nobody gets over 300 total yards here. Missouri finished with 278, Oklahoma with 257. Missouri, like I said, only 143 passing yards to Oklahoma, only finishing up with 135. 135 on the ground for Missouri to 122 for Oklahoma. Missouri 11 for 19 on third downs, decent, compared to the 5 of 15 on third down for Oklahoma. Missouri did have the ball 34 minutes and 26 seconds compared to Oklahoma's 25-34. Look, for Missouri, you had to have this one. This is not a game that you could let slip away to a struggling Oklahoma team, and Missouri just finding a way to get it done. Despite the backup quarterback, we know how important Brady Cook is to that entire team. So now if you look ahead to Missouri's next game next week at South Carolina, 3:15 kickoff time, that's going to be a big one. That's going to be the big one for Missouri. If they can win that game, get to 8-2, then they'll have to go to Starkville to play the worst team in the SEC in Mississippi State. You got to like their chances there, and they finish up with Arkansas at home. So this was a big win when you look at the remaining 3 games for Missouri. They just survive and advance, man. Just find a way to win these games. On the flip side, we're going to take a look at Oklahoma's schedule real quick. Can Oklahoma get to a bowl? 5-5, first year in the SEC. Got to be disappointing for Brent Venables, the entire Oklahoma program and the fan base. You got a bye week, and then you got Oklahoma, and then you're playing Alabama. You got Alabama at home, and then you're going on the road to LSU. Don't think Oklahoma's going to be favored in either one of these games. This may have very well been Oklahoma's last chance to get to a bowl game. They're going to have to pull off a massive upset in one of their final 2 games to even get to postseason play. And I didn't have huge expectation for the Sooners, and I don't know a whole lot of people that did, but I definitely was thinking 7, maybe 8 wins for Oklahoma this year. That defense is just too damn good, too damn talented to fall to 5-5. But yeah, here they are because they just can't make anything happen on the offensive side of the football. So looking at Oklahoma, can they make an upset here in these last 2 games they got? I don't know. I don't see it. It feels like they let a really big opportunity to get to 6 wins slip away. Disappointing year there in Norman, Oklahoma. But for Missouri, if they can just go 2-1 in these final 3, which I think is very doable, that'll get them to 9-3. And after the great year they had last year, I think that just kind of would show consistency, show that they've been building despite the injuries to the quarterback position this year. They've gutted out some tough wins. You're not going to play your best game, right? You're not going to play your best game every week, and Missouri's had plenty of games this year where they just haven't played 4 quarters of good football, but they're finding W's. They're finding W's. They're finding ways to win, and that's all that matters. It shows me the character of this team. It shows me the culture of the program that Eli Drinkowitz is building. Impressive win. Very exciting game. The most exciting game of the weekend in the conference by far, in my opinion. Big shout out to Missouri, man. That was fun to watch, and they're just a gutsy football team that continues to find W's. South Carolina goes up to Nashville, gets their 16th straight win over the Vanderbilt Commodores, continues to own Vanderbilt, continues their domination. 28-7 is the final score. If you take a look at the box score, it kind of tells you everything you need to know. Total yards, 452 for South Carolina, only 274 for Vanderbilt, 238 through the air for the Gamecocks, 166 for Diego Pavia and the Vanderbilt Commodores. South Carolina outrushed Vanderbilt 214-108. South Carolina averaged 7.2 yards per play to Vanderbilt's 4.6. And here's one that'll really stick out to you. Third down efficiency. Vanderbilt 6 of 13. Not terrible, but the Gamecocks go 9 for 12 on third down. Lenore Sellers had himself a day. The redshirt freshman quarterback was 14 for 20, 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks through the air. He added 38 yards on the ground. Raheem Rocket Sanders with a big day, 15 carries, 126, 8.4 a carry, 2 touchdowns. He also added a touchdown through the air and 52 yards on 2 receptions as well, receiving for Raheem Rocket Sanders. What a big win for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks, man. 0-0 after the first quarter, only 7-0 at halftime. They come out in the third quarter, add 14, add another touchdown there in the fourth, just kind of slowly put Vanderbilt away. And it never felt like Vanderbilt was in this game. Diego Pavia looks banged up. Vanderbilt looks banged up. They really struggled offensively last week versus Auburn. Auburn's just the kind of team that'll give games to you, and that's exactly what they did. But you can see that this Vanderbilt offense, I think this Vanderbilt offense is getting a little too conservative. They're kind of living in the shell. And I don't know if that's because Diego is banged up or what it is, but I know they want to play that 3 yards in a cloud of dust, control the time of possession. That Bama game being the example of what Vanderbilt wants to do. And it feels to me like as the season has gone on, they're really getting too conservative and they're not able to push the ball down the field. They're not able to stretch the field. South Carolina's defensive front had a hell of a lot to do with that. South Carolina's defensive front has been impressive all year. They completely dominate the line of scrimmage in this game. Vanderbilt only able to rush for 108 yards total. Looking at Vanderbilt's running backs, Vanderbilt Shedrick Alexander, 10 carries for 30 yards, just nothing there. Diego Pavia, 13 carries for 65 yards. He did okay, 16 for 31 through the air, 166 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Like I said, these last couple of weeks, the Vanderbilt offense just not able to make big plays. But for South Carolina, you came into the game 5-3, going up against a 6-3 Vanderbilt team on the road. Had to have this victory because the schedule for South Carolina, you got a couple of tough games left on the schedule. And man, I can't. I look back at that LSU and those Alabama games and wonder what might have been for the South Carolina Gamecocks. But let's take a look at their schedule real quick. What they've got coming up. We know they got Missouri coming in town next week. Big game. That's got to be the game of the weekend in the SEC. I'm really fired up just thinking about 7-2 Missouri, 6-3 South Carolina. Then they have Wofford. And then they're finishing up with Clemson. Let's see if that Clemson game is going to be at home. They're on the road at Clemson. So for South Carolina, you got a tough game versus Missouri. You got what should be a win, so you should be at least at 7. And then Clemson. Let's see if South Carolina can finish 2-1 in these remaining 3. I think that's realistic. Get to 8-4. I think that would be an awesome year for Shane Beamer. He could be able to look at it and say, hey, we're close here with a redshirt freshman quarterback. 2-point loss on the road to Alabama earlier in the season. You felt like the refs kind of took that LSU game away from them. So you got 2 games left that are toss-ups for South Carolina. That Clemson game will be fun to watch as well. Clemson is very beatable, but still a talented roster. Dabo's still a good coach, despite what people say. So that's just going to be and it'll be on the road as well. How does South Carolina finish? I'm really excited to see it. I think they've got some momentum because if you look at how they've played over the last month, South Carolina loses to Ole Miss 27-3 on October 5th. And from that point on, a 2-point loss, 27-25 at Alabama. Then they beat Oklahoma 35-9. They smashed A&M in a massive game, maybe the biggest win of Shane Beamer's career, either that or the Tennessee game a couple years ago. 44-20 is the final there, and then a 21-point victory yesterday over Vanderbilt, 28-7. Playing good football, 3-game winning streak. A 2-point loss to Alabama right before the start of that 3-game streak. South Carolina, I think they're finding their identity on offense. They know what they bring to the table on defense. Very impressive the way that this team has just kind of hung in there despite some tough losses and continue to put a good product on the field. They've positioned themselves to have a strong finish here, and I think South Carolina is going to do it. I think that they get to 8 wins. Shane Beamer doing his damn thing up there for the Gamecocks, man. It's fun to see the South Carolina fans. You guys are dedicated. You show up despite the hard times, despite the struggles. I have a ton of respect for what y'all do every Saturday up there in South Carolina, so it's good to see it. I'm happy for these South Carolina fans. They deserve it, man. Up to Knoxville, Tennessee, where Tennessee defeats Mississippi State 33-14. We'll keep this one brief because, Mississippi State is just not that good. The story here for Tennessee was, could you just survive and stay healthy and make it to this next game versus Georgia? The staying healthy part of that, I don't know. Starting quarterback Nico leaves the game. Now, after the game, head coach Josh Heupel did say that he would be able to go next week versus Georgia. They felt like they could close the game out versus Mississippi State, get the win, kind of leaning on Dylan Sampson. Gaston Moore comes in for Nico and finishes the game 5 for 8, 38 yards. Didn't ask him to do a whole lot. They just kind of rode Dylan Sampson, who had 30 carries, 149 yards. He averaged 5 yards a carry there for a touchdown. Peyton Lewis added 14 carries for 44 yards, averaging 3.1 a carry there. So Tennessee just quite content to lean on that defense, lean on that running game, get out of there with a dub after their starting quarterback went down. At the time that he went down, Nico was 8 for 13, 174 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He had a nice touchdown pass up the middle there, big explosive play early in the game. So Tennessee, they advanced to 8-1. We'll see how healthy your starting quarterback is. Like I said, Josh Heupel says in the postgame he's going to be good to go next week versus Georgia. We'll see. That's the big question. Tennessee, just good job handling your business, getting a good win versus a very bad Mississippi State team. As far as Mississippi State goes, looking at your quarterback here, Michael Van Buren Jr. goes 10 for 26, 92 yards, no touchdowns and an interception. You did have Devon Booth, did have a nice day on the ground, 20 carries, 125 yards, 6.2 a carry. But Mississippi State was never in this game. They fall to 2-8, some pretty bad losses on the year. We didn't have big expectations for Mississippi State, but I also didn't expect it to look like this. So just a whole lot of questions for that program. Jeff Lebby, what you going to do? Can you pick this thing up off the ground, get it up off the mat, and get back in the fight? Or is this Mississippi State program in for a long – well, what they were before Dan Mullen? Because I think back to my childhood, and Mississippi State was consistently a 2, 3, 4 win team. Dan Mullen came in, kind of raised the level of expectations there. Mike Leach is able to come in and kind of keep it there where they're at least making bowl games and such. 2-8, still got some tough games ahead of them. Going to be a rough year there in Starkville, Mississippi. A lot of questions for Jeff Lebby. How can he get Mississippi State established, get them back to being relevant in this SEC landscape? As far as Tennessee, we're all eyes on next week. All eyes on next week. We'll see how y'all handle it. Going to be a big game. 8-1 versus a 7-2 Georgia team that has to win. You're going to get Georgia's absolute best, right? At least mentally. They're going to come ready to play because they're going to be in a position that Georgia hasn't been in a long time. Backs against the wall. I'm really fired up for that game to see what Josh Heupel dials up. Let's see if that starting quarterback's ready to go. That's going to be a fun one next week. Wrapping things up in Austin, Texas, the Texas Longhorns defeat the Florida Gators 49-17. Not a good day for the Florida Gators. Earlier in the weekend, the Florida athletic director comes out and gives the old vote of confidence. You know, everything is going well when you get a vote of confidence, right? When your athletic director has to come out and say, hey, we're standing behind our coach, that's usually a sign that things are just going great. Comes out, gives a vote of confidence, and then they get absolutely drilled in front of everybody on national TV. Look, I want to be fair to Florida. I want to be fair to Billy Napier. You're down to your third-string quarterback. What are you really going to do? Aiden Warner, 12 of 25, 132 through the air, 0 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. Florida just kind of playing hamstrung. You're playing a team that's much more talented than you on the road, third-string quarterback, but you have the allegations, sexual misconduct allegations versus a Florida basketball coach surfaced earlier in the weekend. Then you have the AD come out and give Billy a vote of confidence, and this is what happens. Florida falls to 4-5. Texas advances to 8-1. For Texas, you just wanted to stay healthy. You wanted to handle your business. Total yards, Texas finishes with 562. Nice balanced day for the Longhorns, 352 through the air. 210 on the ground. The story of the day for Texas, in my opinion, is Quint Ewers. Is he finding his stride? Is he fully healthy and finding his stride? 19 of 27, 333, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Jarrett Gibson added 16 carries for 100 yards on the ground. He had a tutty, and he averaged 6.2 a carry. Jaden Blue, 5 carries, 60 yards, 12 yards a carry, and a touchdown as well there. Isaiah Bond had 44 yards on a nice little reverse. Set Texas up for a touchdown on that drive. He had a nice little 44-yard reverse run there. So Texas came in. They looked ready to play, handled their business, did everything they were supposed to do. And Florida just looked like a team that was beat up. Third-string quarterback. Whole vote of confidence in this whole deal. Tough, man. Tough scene. Looking ahead for Texas, though, you got Arkansas next week. Next week on the road in Fayetteville. Whew. Texas, you should handle your business there, but you can't overlook the Razorbacks, and they'll be fired up to play Texas. That's an 11 a.m. kick. Then Kentucky. comes to Austin, a game that Texas should handle easily, and then that big matchup in College Station versus Texas A&M, a game that every college football fan has had circled. So Texas staying alive, 8-1. This SEC championship race, this who are going to be the two teams to Atlanta. Everyone kind of jockeying for that, jockeying for playoff position. Texas is right there in the thick of things. That only have that one loss there to Georgia. They have responded well since then. So, look, I got to give full credit to Steve Sarkisian, man. He is just right now. He is just on fire when it comes to calling plays. He's in his bag. He's dialing things up. Everything he's doing is working. Starting quarterback goes out early in the year in Quinn Ewers. You start a guy in Arch Manning who has little experience, and the offense doesn't skip a beat. They don't miss. So Sark is right now, he's one of the hottest play callers in the country, if not the hottest. Him and Lane are up there doing their thing, and he's one of the best, man. So you got to acknowledge greatness when you see it. Steve Sarkisian, and the personal comeback that he has made is pretty impressive to overcome some of the demons that he's fought. Just I couldn't say enough about what he's building at Texas. People have always looked at these big jobs like Texas, right? And they say, well, they got all the resources. They just need somebody to come in there and lead them to it. I think that's easier said than done. It is true that if you have all the resources, you get the right guy, it should hit. But I think in a lot of ways, a big job like Texas is almost hard. There's just so much pressure, right? There's a reason why other coaches have come in there and tried and failed since Mac Brown. It takes a special kind of alpha. It takes a special kind of dog, a special kind of individual to want that pressure at a school like Texas, and then to be able, in this age of NIL and them going from the Big 12 to the SEC and all that movement, for him to have Texas where they are right now, all the credit in the world to Steve Sarkisian, man. Just really, really impressive what he's built there in Austin, Texas. Couldn't say enough about it. So listen, guys, that's going to wrap it up. Later in the week, we are going to do a podcast just kind of taking a look at the SEC standings as a whole, where look at the different tiebreaker scenarios, how this whole thing could play off, who could be the two teams that play each other in Atlanta, what are some teams that aren't going to make Atlanta but could still be sitting in a good spot to get an at-large bid in the playoffs. So, man, appreciate you guys joining me. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not. I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out of here.